Hello and welcome to the OSEHRA Working Group meeting for VAPALS ELCAP.
You're on call, right? Yeah, I'm on the VAPALS call. Oh, that's right.
This is your, and I'm sorry we haven't had a call for so long. We've had different things that have come up that have made it so that we couldn't. But I'm happy to say that those things are taken care of now, and we are ready to show you guys some stuff. I want to remind everybody that this session is recorded so that other people in the community who were not able to make the call can do so, can watch it. Any adjustments to the agenda? Okay, George, are you ready to show your screen?
Yep, I am certainly ready to show the screen to start out. So the first big thing we're going to show is, and this just happened yesterday. We have this is the OSEHRA GitHub page on the internet. And if you go down, and I'm not logged in, and if you go down the page, right here is VAPALS. And the repository, we've been using it for development, but this is the first time it's been made public. So it's been, the repository is now public and it's open source, and the license is on it, and it's here. So there's an explanation, a brief explanation about the project, some discussion about the repository structure, what files are there, and then a discussion of the pointer to the Docker images that are used, and also the Jira pointer to the Jira project and the project page. And we have among the things that are here and is described in the repository, we have a docs directory which has various documentation, about the project. We have docs source, which are files that generate the website. We have an interesting thing which many docs directories on repositories don't have, which is a www subdirectory of docs. And an interesting thing about this is if you go in here, these are the actual artifacts, HTML artifacts and images and things, but and JavaScript artifacts that actually run, we use in the system. The system is actually driven off of this directory. So the repository is installed on the runtime system, and we do a link over a symbolic link over into the system environment, and fetch the artifacts right from there, and that's what gets displayed. So that's an interesting thing about the difference between this repository structure and some others you might see. We have all the routines here, and a great deal of work has been, you'll notice in the comments for the posts, there's been a lot of work being done on the routines for SAC compliance, and we've done just a bunch of work. And there's a lot of unit tests. So if all these things that have a U in it are unit tests. All these routines. So we have tremendous development. Larry and Alexis have done a tremendous amount of work to get unit tests, and perhaps after we show the repository and do a brief demo of the system, Larry will show some of the unit tests running. So let's see. This is now I would so we'll talk a little later about installation. I would you can the best way to install the system to get it running for yourself would be to do it with Docker, because we provide a Docker image of the system to allow people to which is already pre-configured with all the source code here, plus many configuration changes in Vista or file changes, etc. So it's that's what the relationship between the repository and the demonstration systems is through Docker. So, any questions? Any discussion about this? Is a celebration. We've got 1,041 commits on this GitHub. We've been using it for a long while now to do version control on our software, and it's Apache 2 licensed. The license here, you can see, and gives a pointer to the Apache 2 license here, and attribution.
Yay. Thank you, George.
You're welcome.
Um,
You want me to give a brief demo of the system?
yes, please.
All right, I will. All right, so there's this is you can see here we have an upgraded and more attractive logo for the system that's been developed and approved. We have patient lookup. Used to be that the pie chart on the system back when we last had a meeting, the pie chart was dummied up. Didn't actually reflect the database, but now this is actually live, and whenever the home page loads, it loads the current statistics of how many of the patients are rural, are urban, and are unknown. We can you can type this. The patient lookup, as you might recall. Oh. The patient lookup is progressive and acts very much modeled after the patient lookup on CPRS, and you can go by last name, or you just start typing and you can find one. Let's take find a patient here that is not yet registered and pick them, and we'll press submit. I'm demonstrating here the patients that were on the list are the patients in the Vista system that's associated with this VAPALS installation, and they're all test patients, of course. This is all synthetic test patients that we're dealing with here. And process is you pick a patient, and then you're given this "Are you sure?" kind of prompt. If you say yes, what's happening behind the scenes is we actually went back to Vista with RPC calls and pulled down demographic information about the patient, like, for example, their social security number, their date of birth, age, gender, and and populated this. And then this is called the intake screen. And we also did things like pull down the address, the address that's on the record, in the Vista record for the patient is pulled down. We then also take this zip code, and using tables that we obtained from the CDC, we did a computation of whether this is a rural zip code or an urban zip code. And so we actually pre-filled this with rural. Now, it still can be changed at this point if, in fact, that's not the right selection, but it's been pre-filled so that it could be just accepted if needed. Then why don't I go ahead and complete this answer these questions and complete this to give a demonstration of what happens after the intake process. That's been populated. Smoking history, the past.
I want to mention that especially the intake form is not quite settled. We have some required user changes that we are told are in the pipeline. But
right. So, but the intake form as it is now works. In other words, there's nothing functionally incomplete here. There's content. There'll be changes to the intake form to gather more information, etc. But in terms of in terms of the basic system flow, this is going to be the same. This is a system flow that actually works.
mm-hmm.
And so so this intake form can actually be used to test the system and to verify that all the components work together with it. So we have to. You'll notice I pressed submit and it did not submit. So you go back and look for the red part. The error returns put the things that are required but have not been answered in red, and that's a convention in all the forms. So now I think I've got them all. I press submit, and then the flow of the system is then this patient gets added to the database, and we generate an intake note, a note that can be copied, and a note that represents the information just given on the intake form, and can be copied and pasted into CPRS to create an encounter note for the patient, and that's so that's an important part of the. And at that point, the patient is registered into the VAPALS system, and they have a case review page. And this is a page that will grow over time as you add, as the patient participates in the program, and as new forms are added for that patient to the system. And from here, you can go back to that intake form that we looked at, or you can actually go back to the note that we just saw, and you'll be able to see that. But in addition, you can add new forms to the patient's for the patient. So we could add a background form, for example. And I'm not going to go and fill all this one entirely out, but it gathers information about comorbidities and cancers that the patient has had, pulmonary problems, cardiac diseases, diabetes, a great deal of additional information. This is not a required form. It's because for many patients, this information is available inside Vista, so it may or may not be filled out for every patient. You'll notice that I did not complete the form. I pressed the button Save for Later, and so when I go back to the case review page, the background form is shown with today's date, but with the word incomplete here. Incomplete. So let's see, this patient, Goldner 493. So one of the things about incomplete is on the incomplete form report. This patient should now show up. Goldner 433, let's see. There they are. So they have an incomplete form. So that there are reports then here that allow for different purposes. You got the participant follow-up, which shows this is the activity. And these forms, over time, these forms are going to contain some different columns of information for the patient, but they work now kind of as expected. You also have we're looking at adding in the future a ability to select any date ranges that you would want to have for the follow-up forms. So these are the participants whose follow-up date is coming in the next 30 days. So and then the activity report is the report of patients that have had activity on their record in the last 30 days. The missing CT evaluation, these are the ones where these people are, patients are in the system, but there's not been a CT evaluation form done on them, and that's important. So in fact, we'll probably find our patient we just added right here. So when a CT scan is scheduled and performed for the patient, then a CT eval form can be added for that patient, and this is a form that is filled out by radiologists when they're actually looking at the CT scan, and it's got a great number of details about the scan and about things that are seen by the radiologist on the scan, and this is absolutely critical part for every of the program for every patient. So that's why we have a report on it which says which patients are in the program but yet don't have a CT valve form filled out. So I'm not going to fill it out all right now. I'm showing you that it's here, and maybe at a later in future weeks we might have a much more detailed demonstration of this form and how it works and what it produces. So we have now the CT valve form. So I think that's what I had planned to demo about the system.
Hey George, I wanted
Yes.
to ask you, how do you load the HTML pages and JavaScript pages? What's done in the background to do that?
We have a graph database, a YADA graph database that has a record of where on the hard disk each of those forms are, and there's a FileMan file called the form mapping file that associates a logical page with the name of a HTML file, and we have a function called begetThis, which uses the graph, the YADA graph database to and reads the file into using a kernel call. It reads the file off the Linux drive, the Linux folder into Mumps Global, and then we serve that through the web server.
Okay. All right. So how do you handle relative links, or you don't have any of those? Like, let's say a link to load CSS or load JavaScript.
No, we don't. They must be. They are. How do we handle them?
I can tell you that there are relatives links,
Right.
and they just work within the same directory that we're running this particular page out of.
Oh,
So really everything goes through this VAPALS path, if you see on the top of the browser.
yeah.
And so really it's mumps that's actually telling the browser to render certain HTML.
Okay.
So the path is this, and all the other resources are relative to this path.
Okay, George, can you remove that that VAPALS and see what the server root shows? Oh, weird. Okay.
Yeah, we really want. We really want. We're not. This is not a. We try to get rid of the ability to play with the URL and to explore inside the system. This is the way you get inside the system, and no matter where you go in the system. So no matter what part of the system you're on. So now we're in the case review, right? This hasn't changed.
So it's a single page application.
Well, it's not actually.
Not?
It's not at all. We are written a mumps router, a mumps gateway router.
Yes.
That routes. So it's not, and that router isn't a page at all. It's a background process in the web server. So basically, you're sending a post. Everything gets to it with a post. So there is data being passed, like so. You go to a follow-up form, right? So you'll notice that this didn't change, but data was passed along to the system, to the mumps code, to tell it what page to load. So it's not a. So it's not a. It's not a single page system at all. It's a controlled routed service is what it is.
Okay, I don't want to take any more of the call, but as sort of the person who did some of did some of the original code of the package, I certainly would like to know more about this.
Well, I would be delighted. In fact, I would be eager to walk you through how we use your web server to implement this kind of thing, because we think it's very desirable to not to protect the URLs and not have it be. And this is a feature for security and.
Okay.
And it's very, very impressive. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, but so that why don't we tee that up for a later one of our calls? We can walk you through the gateway and show you how it's done. So.
Thank you, George. Any other
You're welcome.
questions or comments about the application as it is now?
It's looking good, but where it says like rural engagement with VA, it should be VA without the hyphen, PALS dash ILCAP test. Throughout the VA, there are multiple places where it just says VA PALS. That's not correct.
So this is a typo here, is what you're saying, Claudia, right?
Right.
Okay. Dash ILCAP.
There should be several other, throughout the thing, it should always be the VA PALS ILCAP.
Like this?
Yeah.
So this isn't technically a typo. What you're saying there is actually the name of the site that we're running under. So if this were running in Phoenix, for example, it would say Rural Engagement in Phoenix. The next VA PALS test is really what this particular server has named their site. So, I mean, that can be changed, but I'm just saying it's not something that has changed in code. It's really a configuration for what the site name is called.
Right. This will say Phoenix here, I think.
Oh, I see.
This is going to say Phoenix, right?
Okay. But there's several other places where the name of the system and so on should be, is that one that's up there?
Okay, we'll go through it and see if we can find the rest of those. Claudia.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
I thought I got them all, Claudia. So if you found, have a particular example, please let me know. This is Dominic.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Other comments, questions?
Well, I'm not sure if you're going to cover this later, but we're interested. We want to know we want to know, when do you plan to submit to the technical journal and documentation for helping us install and run the tests.
Right.
All right.
So,
So
go ahead,
I
George.
guess I should. I will let Linda answer the question about when, but we've taken a good start at documentation for installing, and that's right over here. And I think we have more extensive documentation, don't we, on the Docker install that we're going to include in the journal article?
Yes.
Yes.
So
So we're developing a comprehensive install instructions that will go into the journal article for installing via the Docker images. For testing,
you can't install it via getting a kits build?
no.
Not at this
No?
point.
Nope.
Okay. Fair enough.
And Larry, would you be prepared to show us a demo of the unit tests? It's not a complete at this point. We had thought that the unit tests are terrific, and I think that if Larry could share his screen and run the unit test for us, you'll see. And there will of course be instructions on the running the unit tests as well. But as you'll see, it's been designed to be very easy to do.
Sure.
All right.
Let me quickly, before I share my screen, because I'm sure this is going to work, but in case it doesn't, yeah, mention I've had my home network speed change, so it should work. That the unit tests, most of you already know, but are extremely important. They should be written. As you write code, you should have a unit test going either in that code or in a separate routine all the time. And I would say that I do that, but Olga Gapawing and the other people on the line would keep me away. So, but just as a quick example, these aren't done just for submissions. These are done during development for a reason. And so I made a number of changes to pieces of code a few weeks ago, ran my unit tests, everything looked fine, and George realized that it wasn't working when he used VAPALS and actually told me where the error was. So it turns out the reason that happened was because that was an API that I didn't have in my unit tests. So unit tests are very important, should be done and used during development to keep from, among other things, impacting others. So let me try sharing my screen. And
That's working, Larry. We can see it.
okay, then I'm going to reduce this. So there is a unit test, as you know, was put together, I think, largely initially by Dr. Joel Ivey, and since then there's been work by other people. Sam and some of the people on our team are real pros at this. We have actually Alexis put together a SAMI UT routine, which will run all of the unit tests for the VAPALS routines in Vista or in our M environment. So I'm going to go ahead and start running that. And then as an example, because I believe that all of these will run without error, and to give a real life example, what really happens is here's one on my other screen. We actually are not right now using the radiology, pulling radiology procedures and physicians and stuff, but we are ready to do that when it's time. And you'll notice I got a failure here, and in this case the failure is because we actually don't have any active radiology residents in our system right now. But that's what a fail looks like. And so what we're seeing over here is going to take a couple of minutes to finish, but as it runs the unit test for each routine, and again, you don't have to have a separate routine for each of your M routines, but for a simple-minded person like me, it's kind of handy. So we actually have, Alexis and I have a unit test routine that examines each one of the routines that are written by George and other people. And so this is going to fly through each one. It's going to give you a time that it took. And it'll take a few minutes to finish, but this will give us a summary, not only of all the unit tests that ran, but it'll tell you what the percentage coverage for each of the unit tests, which means for each one of the routines that Sam is using. And at the same time, it will give you an overall percentage of coverage. And so what you want to do, of course, is to have your unit tests cover as much of your code as you can. It would be wonderful if you could cover 100%, and we have near that in some routines, but some routines are more difficult. And as long as I'm blabbing, let me say also, for the unit tests that we put together, often what's happening is, as George alluded to, is an HTML page is being built. So rather than run a unit test that just says, did you build an HTML page, we actually have data stored in a graph store file that shows what we expect every line in that HTML to look like. And we compare the two. So we're not only just making sure that it generated it, but we make sure it generates it as it should. So right now, it looks like we're running about 90% coverage. As you can tell, if you look up, we have some routines that we're struggling with. And so I'm going to get some help on these. And these are one that's, one of the difficulties in doing unit tests on some of these is how you enter your data on the VAPALS sheets, for instance, for looking at CE forms, etc., will determine how many lines in the code are crossed. And so to do all the lines, you have to have different results for each one, and I haven't got them. So we have lows of around 70%. We have highs of 100%, which is tough to do, but some routines work well with that. And then up above, it will tell you with each one of the routines, it'll tell you actually which one of the APIs were covered the best. So anyway, this gives us a lot of information all at once. So I think that's about the end. Can't overemphasize the importance of having these running all along and trying to ferret out a way of testing almost every line of code. Because it lets you just feel, you make a change and you can feel very comfortable that you haven't broken anything. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Larry. Any questions or comments?
That's very, very impressive. I'm very glad that you guys have put this much effort into unit tests.
Well, I was allowed to spend a lot of time with this, and so.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop there.
And this is Rick Marshall. I just want to add that for those who aren't familiar with the unit test frameworks and with OSEHRA certification, that 90% number is a very important number to us, because we want our application to reach OSEHRA certification level 4, which is the highest level that OSEHRA certifies at. To make sure that the VA understands that this software has been thoroughly tested and documented. So that's why you're seeing the number that you are. We're trying to make sure that we get above 90%, so that if there's some last minute changes, we're still within the framework. But the goal is to get this thing as highly certified as possible, so that the VA can be confident in the software that they're going to be running.
Other comments? Okay, anything else? Any questions that we haven't answered, or any comments about?
I asked you about timeline. Do you have any?
It's partly we're waiting on there's we've been told there will be some changes to the intake form that they really want to make sure go through the certification process. So we're waiting on that, and they were supposed to have it to us yesterday, and they have not. So that is one of our major things that we're waiting for. Once we get that, we can make those changes, and I can make any changes to the technical article that are a result of that. I have a few more things to do on the technical article. I'm hoping for a kind of a diagram to show maybe the flow through the routines. And so I can't say for sure when we're going to be able to submit. If it it just occurs to me that we could, if you guys would like, we could do like an initial submission that would have almost everything, so that you can kind of get a look at it. And then once we have the final stuff where we're allowed to submit, we can give you the rest of it. But that's up to Sarah whether they want us to do that or not.
So Joe Schneider is on the call. Just want to see what does he prefer?
Hey everybody. I'm kind of fine with either. Even if you don't want to necessarily make the submission through the tech journal, you just want to send, the kind of documentation to us. We'll be happy to look over it and determine if there's anything else that we can do. And the fact that you have a Docker container means it's fairly easy for us just to start delving in and see what we can update and really have it there. I mean, the fact that you have the unit test, the fact that you're still working on your documentation is a very good sign. And I think that, we can probably make do with what we have if you don't exactly feel comfortable sending it out yet. So I wouldn't necessarily force you to do that, but if you want to send us some things, we'd be happy to look at it.
Okay. We will talk amongst the team and decide what we're going to do.
Oh, great. I'm looking forward to getting it whenever you decide.
Thanks, Joe. Any other comments?
This is Rick Marshall again. I got a comment just to let the OSEHRA folks know. One of the things that we're doing at a technical level, in addition to working on pushing up the unit test coverage into the mid-90s, if we can pull it off, the other thing that we're working on right now is going through everything that Xindex has reported and making changes to get everything compliant. So in some cases, that means replacing Z-write commands or Z-system commands or other non-portable commands so that we've got portable code. In other cases, it means splitting routines that have got too big and reorganizing them. So that's causing a little bit of shifting in the routine lists and so forth, which is one of the things that's causing us to pause a little bit on the final submission. We want to make sure that we've got you the right list of routines and that everything's going to pass Xindex.
Yeah, within the passings, just for future references, we really only worry about the F warning, the F reports. So if there's style warnings, I think that the routine length is a style, but maybe not. It really, those are kind of okay. We don't necessarily require that Xindex reports no errors, but we do have Xindex exceptions for guarded code. If we're looking at platform-specific code, GTM codes that won't ever run on cache, as long as it's guarded or there's some sort of sanity around it. We can have some problems, but obviously we prefer it to be clean. But
right,
we can't always get that way.
Right.
And so,
Understood.
Since OSEHRA is going to be looking at your Docker, how often do you update your Docker image?
So we've been updating the Docker image every few weeks. There are times when we're sort of at a quicker pace during development, but as we go into certification, of course, it's gonna stabilize so that they're working off of a solid product. In other words, it varied.
Other comments, questions? Okay. Well, I think unless there's anything else, we can give you guys back about 15 minutes of your day. So we're looking forward to, we'll probably have a bit more of a technical meeting next time. So, but we will make sure to let people know on the announcement so that they can decide whether or not they want to attend based on technicality, because we don't want to make anybody's brain fog up from talking too much about code. Anyway, so have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Goodbye.